The idea of buying the lottery ticket and what that potential has, that's the thing that you get wrapped up in your head and forget what's in front of you.
I'm not saying everyone has to achieve high level of success, but if you're going to talk it, then I'm going to hold your feet to the fire until you get burned alive.
Welcome back, SideQuesters. We are still in Crime and Punishment. Today we're going to cover a little bit of Part 4, and we'll see where we land in 5 and 6. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me back again.
Same.
Sucks to be here, Slava, with you.
Thanks, buddy.
Oh, was my mic on?
Yes, but the camera somehow turned off, so that's good.
Well, I want to start us off with a line that I thought was super interesting from Part 4 by Porfiry Petrovich, when he says that I am a bachelor, a man of no consequence and no use to society. I think that was in chapter 5. I don't know. I just thought that was a pretty harsh toke there by Porfiry. So if I'm a bachelor, I'm no use to society.
It could be 3 observations too. That he is a bachelor, he is of no use to society. So they could be connected in his mind. But back then, I would imagine needing to procreate, to continue your lineage at the very least, and also have a family to work the fields. Not in his case, obviously. He is higher up on the social strata. But I think back then, for women for sure, it was, not being married by a certain age was seen as, almost the end of the world. It was not viewed well.
Yeah, I see that.
You made the observation a couple episodes ago, Slava. You're like, well, you were a spinster at 21. It's like, well, when you lived to 32, you're basically dead.
But not everybody lived to 32. Plenty of people lived into their 80s and 90s during these times, too.
It's infant and child mortality is what brought that average down.
Yeah, absolutely. And, medicine wasn't as advanced as it is now. So childbearing years were a commodity almost, dare I say. So the older you got, the less chance you would have a healthy pregnancy. And that's it. If you don't have enough kids to forget working the fields, I'm sure even people in Porfiry's social strata, again, you needed sons and daughters to, manage the household, continue on the father's traditions and his work and his, even side projects. I'm going to use modern terms for them. That you needed kids to maintain a life.
I'd be dead by now if I were living there in this time. I mean, there's no insulin, and I'm a type 1 diabetic, so...
You would have lived longer than me, Josh. They needed to do surgery on me day 1, so, I would definitely be dead.
Good old days.
Well, I also think that comment was in some ways part of, I guess, the back and forth between him and Rodian, because he's also trying to, downplay himself a little bit. He's like, oh, we're just having a normal conversation, because I think later on, after saying that, he says, oh, it takes 2 normal people an hour and a half before they can actually talk about anything reasonable. There's just, you get smart people together and they just do nothing. And so that chapter is actually, to me, really interesting, because I remember when I was first listening to it, I wasn't sure how much of it was actually real, how much of it was Rodian's paranoia, and how much of it was an intentional game versus unintentional. And because it's told to us in a way that is from, Raskolnikov's point of view, that these long, drawn-out monologues from character to characters.
Yeah, I imagine, and I thought about it this morning, I imagine Porfiry is just messing with Raskolnikov. Some of it is maybe commentary by Dostoevsky, what Josh picked up on. Most of it, I think, is him trying to get into Raskolnikov's head, being an interrogator, just breaking him down slowly, and using Raskolnikov's paranoia against him.
Yeah, because he walks through so many different things. I was like, oh, if I were to do this, I would go through it this way, and it's exactly what he's doing, and alluding to these things that he knows about from Raskolnikov. But he also repeatedly says he doesn't have any actual evidence. So that might actually be in part 5
Yep.
when he talks to him that he says
Yep,
that.
the latter part of part 5.
The conversation of like, well, these people get together, they don't talk about anything real. That still hit for me. I've talked to thousands of people, and oftentimes we don't actually say anything. Because when you want to broach a real topic, they go, oh, well, you know, and they give a vague answer.
How was your weekend? Oh, the weather's crazy weather we're having.
Let's talk about the weather. Yeah, I've been outside, Tommy. Moron.
Yeah. It's a cultural thing, and I hate to be that guy, because having been born overseas and having grown up in a Russian bubble, I sound like an asshole with just Americans. But there, without any, trying to be malicious, or at all trying to be malicious, there is a certain cultural aspect to that is just ingrained in American culture. Small talk is preferred to a deeper conversation, and to have a deeper conversation, you'd have to have a relationship like me and Jonathan, which has been close to 20 years. And if Jonathan brings me into this friend group, automatically you guys would feel more comfortable than if you met me at a coffee shop and we had the same conversation. And that's not even a knock. That's just, I think, part of the culture where it gets, kind of annoying and just banal. If you, again, maybe that's not the right word, is to Jonathan's point, when you're trying to have a conversation with somebody that is relatively close to you, and they throw these platitudes out to you, or they only want to talk about the weather, they don't want to talk about anything meaningful. And that's not to say that we have a trauma bond the second time we get together, but to be able to be vulnerable without feeling like you're sharing too much or you're giving up some sort of, invisible armor. And maybe I'm completely off base. I have 3 Americans, born and raised here sitting in front of me, so maybe you guys can tell me, am I reading that correctly or am I off?
No, there's 2 things. There's West Michigan, which is where most of us are located, which is absolutely its own weird breed of Dutch people. Sorry, Josh. That don't want to have a real effing conversation because you need to be prim, proper. Everyone needs to see you as buttons are tied and things like that, and you have to look correct. But then it's all bless your heart and, hey, did you hear about so and so, and this person did, she's a whore, and it's just it's just this nonsense. And then you got me, and this is, take it for whatever you want. I'm the son of a Brooklyn Jew. We don't care. Look, hey, let's talk money, let's talk politics, let's talk religion, and we can be different. We can have different opinions. Slava and I have huge different opinions about Christianity. And you know what? We have a sandwich afterward, and it's okay. And we just go, hey, you know what? We're still building the thing together. We're still friends. I still disagree with you on this point or this point, but these 3 we agree on, and it's fine. And we can talk money, and we can talk, marital problems. You live to everything. It's life, guys. But it's America, but specifically, and absolutely would love to run these people over with a train, trolley car problem. It's West Michigan. And they complain about well, I don't like small talk. Then stop being the fucking problem.
I think you're onto something about that, because my dad and his family's Polish on that side, and so there's a lot more of a straightforwardness to it, except for, I guess, my aunts who are into the gossip. But that might be because of the surroundings of West Michigan, because a lot of these long monologues, particularly in this book, with the female characters like Katarina or Raskolnikov's mother, whose name I never remember, they go off on these really long, just talking about everything, gossiping about everything, to where I think even at one point where Sonia's like, she invents my mother, or Katerina, invents all of these fantasies, and she truly believes them, and she just takes stuff to far out places that aren't even real.
Yeah.
I want to comment, though, and defend a little bit something with what Jonathan said, because I think it's what Jonathan was commenting on with West Michigan. I think it's a uniquely American Dutch thing, where people from the Netherlands who have been here for a long time have developed that type of personality, I guess, if you will. But My Dutch grandparents who were born in the Netherlands are very direct. And like actually Dutch people themselves from the Netherlands have this reputation of being very direct and being like talking about things like politics, religion, money, all these things. And my mom's parents, who were also Dutch, but like were born and raised here, and for I don't even know what generation ended up coming over, they were very much like, we don't talk about money, we don't talk about these things. And so like there was kind of a culture shock when they met my dad's parents, who were like, oh my gosh, you're a barber, you can't make that much money. Like, how much money do you make? And my grandmother from the Netherlands like will be very direct about like, oh, you need to lose weight, like you're eating too much, all those kind of things she would say. And so yeah, I think it is like a uniquely American thing that we have, but definitely I have noticed it in West Michigan compared to like meeting people from other parts of the country.
Literally any big city, anywhere else. We used to go to church with this one family that was from the Netherlands, and they were super direct, which was weird as a kid because you're like, that's not how you talk to people here. Yeah. It's how we talk to each other at home, but like it's not how you talk to people here. But that's the thing. And my wife, she's the daughter of two immigrants, a Mexican and a Colombian. And the same thing. It's like, oh, hey, you need to, and her grandmother. Oh my God. You are fat. You need to stop eating. You need to like, and then if they're too thin, like, why aren't you eating? It's literally just like, you don't stop yourself. You just say things. And frankly, these people are happier.
Yeah. Like my boss is a Brooklyn Jew. No, New Jersey Jew. And he's very direct. And he bristles a lot of folks, and they all love him and love, our little team. But some people get bristled. And like a conversation I was having yesterday with him, I was explaining something to him, asking him I wrote a justification to take somebody on a team building trip. And their boss is being, a twat about it. So I had to write a justification. And I started to talk to my boss just to get like, am I writing this correctly? Like, because you're the same level as his PM. I want to make sure this sounds normal. And I'm going to send this over. And I was distracted. And so I paused a couple times as I was talking to him to listen to somebody else. Because there's like a chaos in the office. And he's like, hey, can you stop with the pauses and just tell me what you're trying to say? And I didn't cry. I'm like, yeah, obviously. Like, I was pausing, and he was like, what are you talking about? Stop pausing. And we also have a relationship. But I've seen him do that to new employees. He's like, stop right there. You need to stop talking. We need to be in a meeting. Move it. I told you twice already. And, like, to me and 90% of the office, nobody gets butthurt about it. But you can tell the people who are more, again, American, they're like, oh my gosh, you can't talk like that. You have to be more polite. He's like, he wasn't being impolite. He was just like, chop, chop. We're late for a meeting.
Yeah, there's things to do. You can't dilly dally. We got stuff to do.
I am that person at work when like I get so many phone calls coming in. I'm just, what do you need? Thanks. And then I just immediately hang up. I have to call out and interact with, hundreds of people on the radio. And I'm just like, tell me what I need, shut up, and get on with what you're doing, because I have 20 other people that need attention.
There have been so many emails that I've, acknowledged. Best Slava. Received. Some people that I'm friends with, I'll spend a little bit more time. But if it's just another contractor and he's given me a con-op, which is a conceptual thing, like for what we're doing with the campaign, I was like, received, boom.
I've even gotten hassled by my older brother, when we've dealt with contractors together. And the thing is, like, I've been on a call. This is literally for a big CRM that I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. And the guy's trying to sell us of, hey, you should activate these extra things, whatever. And on the call, I'm asking him pointed questions like, hey, what's the capability of this AI thing that you're talking about? Like, does it fulfill these XYZ things? Because I'm using a bunch of AI tools. And he's like, well, and he's salesing, right? And then he's like, well, let's do a follow. I was like, well, we're going to need a follow-up call. I'm not going to buy this because it's on sale. Like, I don't think it's actually going to do us any good. He follows up. And in the email, I'm like, well, we didn't have a follow-up call because he's like pushing, and I think it was an automated email, but he's pushing like, hey, we got it on sale right now. This is like back November or something. And I was like, first off, I'm not going to buy it. We said we were going to have a second call. Here are the discrepancies I still have. Just direct. And then my brother comes up to me. He's like, wow, getting a little feisty there. I was like, it's a salesman. I don't want to buy that. There's no reason to spend the money if it's not going to solve the problem. And I told him that on the call. I don't think I'm being crazy. Like, I don't think it's just direct communication, which is funny because my brother is more direct than I am. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, moving along with the book to
Let's
be direct. The conversation in Porfiry's office immediately ends because the workman, Nikolai, who's like been interrogated or something, just bursts in and confesses. And that throws a wrench in some things in some very strange ways, because it seems to me like Porfiry's men were coaching him, but yet Porfiry still seemed surprised that he busted in. He's like, no, it's too early, or it's not the time for this right now. And so, like, was the whole thing, like, because it seemed to me that Nikolai, the workman, was genuine in his confession of, like, his coached confession. He was genuine in that he was kind of broken down to give it.
What's with the delirium back in the day? Yeah.
Well, but what I'm wondering about is, like, did he coach him? Was he coached to do that for some ends of messing with Raskolnikov? Because that's, like, that is so many layers of just, like, devious. It's like, what the heck, dude?
Yeah.
If that's the case. And I don't know what necessarily to make of that.
Like, Porfiry, or how do you say these freaking names? The officer. You think he's coached the painter that confesses, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he directly coached it, but he had, like, had his other people in the office do it, because he seemed like he had a surprise. Oh wait, no, the surprise was the other person that jumped him in the street and was like, "You're a murderer."
Yeah.
That's what the surprise was. That's right. I got the two mixed up, but I still don't know what to make of.
Yeah. So Porfiry
painter
is his name, and unless I'm looking at it, I sometimes forget. Unless it's like Raskolnikov, Dostoevsky, a name that I've said 100,000 times, but it's Porfiry. Yeah.
Yeah. Once I see it,
I'm trying to find in my cliff notes. I'm trying to find Nikolai. What is his name? The guy who confesses? You just said.
Yeah, it was Nikolai. Yeah, he was one of the two painters, because I know. Oh, because the reason I was wondering if he was coaching that is because in part 5 he admits to essentially staging a conversation in front of Razumikin, knowing Razumikin would come and, talk to Raskolnikov about it. And in that one they talked about Razumikin was talking about how cunning that painter must have been to, do all of that horsing around in the stairwell immediately after killing somebody to throw him off.
Right. I was reading that this morning. I had to power through the rest of the book because I didn't have time to read it during the week. So I powered through parts of it yesterday, throughout the day, and this morning. And I was thinking the same thing, that the painter was either a setup or he was delusional, and so sometimes people give false confessions, and he came in because he was overburdened with his delusions, I guess, and confessed, and it threw a wrench into Porfiry's screwing with Raskolnikov. So I was going back and forth. I'm like, what is going on here? I had the same questions you did, Kris. But it's interesting to watch. It's fascinating to watch Raskolnikov in this portion of the book, because he's now over his sickness. He's now better, right? And you could still see that schism in him where he's going back and forth, even in his confession later to Sonia about the murder. And before that, he tells her all this stuff and says, tomorrow I will tell you who the murderer is. And he goes to decide whether or not he's going to confess to the cops or not. Then he comes back the next day, confesses to her. She realizes she has an affinity for him beyond just a guy who's helped her once or twice, who was a friend of her dad's or a drinking buddy of her dad's. She promises to go to him to the slave labor camp. She keeps trying to preach the gospel to him in some way. And Raskolnikov, to me, in a more toned-down way, is still going nuts, still is in battle with himself. So it's funny to see this guy who we meet in the first chapter, who's this, just degenerate, as Jonathan called him, and then him going crazy, him murdering, him going even more crazy, going into the depths of depression and delusion, then kind of evening out a little bit, but not to the degree where he's okay with what he did, or is suppressing the thoughts about what he did or the emotions about what he did, but he kind of tones down a little bit, and that toning down, and guys tell me if I'm completely off base, that toning down is what ultimately leads to his confession later on in part 6. Despite him still being all over the place, he's just a toned down, crazy person now.
I think you're onto something, because anytime, like, going off of Nikolai confessing and then the other surprise talking to him in the street, anytime it seems that he's getting away with it, he seems to have this renewed energy of like, yes, I'm getting away with it. And then life continues, and then he, as things slow down, the weight of it all just kind of slowly builds on him more and more, to where he does eventually
And
confess.
the other side of that coin, or the other side of that box, if you will, is this moment, and I forgot which chapter it was in, but this moment where he expresses remorse for Elizabetha. Like she was, an unfortunate, result of what he was doing. But that old crow, like, almost like, her, that's fine. The old crow deserved to die. I was doing what I had to. I was trying to make humanity better. I'm paraphrasing. And the old crow deserved it. But Elizabetha, that was unfortunate. That was unforeseen. That's something that, weighs on me. Again, paraphrasing what he is saying. Yeah. I thought that was interesting too. And I think, going off to what I said earlier, I think him evening out, for lack of a better term, having that moment, having the moments you just mentioned, Chris, with him thinking he's getting away with it, he's now thinking about that victim, the Elizabetha, and that's another kind of push into the direction of confessing. But at this point, he really doesn't care about the pawnbroker, Alyona Ivanovna, I think her name is. He still considers her as a righteous kill, if you will.
Yeah, we touched on that briefly last week, if I remember right. But when he was talking to Sonia about Lizaveta, something that struck me was Sonia talking about how they were friends and how she gave Sonia her Bible, and that's what they constantly met with each other and were reading it together.
Yep.
What struck me was that, in a way, Lizaveta was both Sonia's salvation and is the first steps to what would become Raskolnikov's salvation through his, murdering of her in her home.
Yeah. And Elizabetha and Sonia exchanged religious objects. So there's this theological, spiritual, mystical thing that's going on between them, and they're friends. So Raskolnikov now is confronted not only with the guilt of the consequences of him trying to kill the old crow, which ended up killing Elizabetha, an innocent person. He now realizes that Sonia and her are buddies, and that further kind of drives him, in his madness to confession. But I saw Jonathan's mind-blown face, so what you got there for us?
Well, the blood of the martyrs speaks a better word for the condemned to bring them to redemption.
I guess, yeah.
I suppose. I didn't think about that, though, Chris, of like Lizaveta being the precursor to Raskolnikov's redemption, if you will, and seeking of repentance.
What was the fact that Sonia had made a point of saying that the Bible was hers? Was Lizaveta's. That's what's like made that immediate connection, because it gave me the impression of that she wasn't religious and didn't read regularly until her friendship with Lizaveta.
So do you think that there's a connection with the purposefulness that Dostoevsky put with the Lazarus story, sort of in that same conversation, is one question. And the follow-up question would be, did anyone else feel like Sonia is a little bit like a Mary Magdalene figure for Raskolnikov, where she's like Yeah, all right.
I don't know who Mary Magdalene is. Sorry.
She's was delivered from demons by Jesus and used to be a harlot.
Yeah.
Can you tell I don't read the Bible really?
But
when you described the story, I
So with the Lazarus story, I think it's layered. I think it's somebody being raised from the dead. So it's Raskolnikov coming out of his secular mire, being weighed down by these secular leftist radical ideas. I want to caveat that. Not just Raskolnikov is not just hating on leftists. The radical leftist ideas. He and coming over to the traditionalist, the Christian, the Orthodox Russian side is him being raised like Lazarus, and also suffering. Remember, we talked about Dostoevsky saying suffering's part of this world. The traditionalist radicals, and specifically the leftist secular radicals, that's not the way to fix anything. Russia will suffer through this ultimately through Christianity, through tradition, through the people, through its soil. It will overcome all these things. So I think it's the suffering of the women in the Lazarus story. And Jesus says, things will be okay. Lazarus shall live again. And then the dual meeting, or the spiritual meeting for Raskolnikov specifically, is him being raised from the dead. My personal opinion. I think it plays a dual role for a guy like Dostoevsky.
Yeah, I definitely read that also. Like, his interest in the Lazarus story is being like a desire for himself to be raised from the dead, because in this murder, he essentially killed himself, which is something I think that we talked about previously.
So what about the Mary Magdalene question, where she is received a redemption for herself, and so then she goes out and is basically a disciple of Christ to other people because she's been freed from her own things?
And you're saying Lizaveta is this, or Sonia is this? I can see that.
Sonia.
I don't think Dostoevsky had that in mind. Maybe he did. We can only speculate, but to speculate upon your speculation, I think that's a fair theory. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Looking at it that way.
Yeah, when I was reading it or going through it, I didn't get that, but no, I definitely see that.
We see that regularly in the Gospels, where someone receives something from Christ and then they become an evangelist because they've received such wonderful freedom in their redemption. And so, although she is still in this harlot space because of her circumstances, she's still like, but I've also received so much, and needs to share that.
Why do you guys think Raskolnikov made Sonia read the story to him? That's a question that popped up into my head, because he's insistent that she read it to him. He could have read it, and Dostoevsky could have made him just read it, but he's insistent. He even sits down, puts his hands over his eyes, is dejected, sitting at the dinner kitchen table, wherever he is, and he makes Sonia read it.
That struck me as him almost in some way trying to test her faith, because part of me thinks he was desperate for something in some way, of where he knows I think he remembers what's in it, because he said he doesn't really read it, but he used to as a child. So he obviously knows the Lazarus story, although I think she said something like, "Oh, you're looking in the wrong place for it. It's in
the fourth gospel." Yeah,
it's in the other book.
He's in Revelation. What?
But so he probably has a similar knowledge to me of I remember it, but I don't actually know it. But I feel like he was probably in a somewhat of a torturous mindset of wanting to is your faith genuine? I guess.
I got this sense that he, he's kind of rejected Christianity, and developed his own moral system, and so he almost doesn't want to pick up scripture himself and read it, but he knows that Sonia has this connection with scripture and with faith, and so he still has this curiosity and wants her to read it to him rather than him reading it himself, because he feels as though he has rejected it.
My take was that he wanted to be washed, and so he couldn't do it himself. He needed someone else to usher him in, where he's the reason he couldn't read it, even though we know he's a writer and a reader and a researcher, is because he's like, I need someone to usher me.
That's what I was going to say. Sonia, in that moment, is acting as a representative of Christianity, and he's looking to her for absolvement, to be absolved, and she's acting like a priest almost in this sense to him, in his mind. So that's what I was going to say. So, hey, Jonathan and I agree on Christianity. Or this is this part of it. Yeah.
Partly. Just the Russian Orthodox side.
I think that makes sense, actually. The reason why I was thinking that it might have been tested was because of how resistant she seemed to have been to it. But I think anybody being as forceful as he was would take on some kind of hesitant attitude, I guess.
Russians are a lot, man. Let me tell you.
We're quiet, simple people.
Shut up. Get the hell out of here.
Oh, goodness.
But part 4 basically ends with him talking to the one guy on the street, asking him for forgiveness. And he's like, ask God for forgiveness, which that struck me as weird because in Raskolnikov's mind, you have this person, oh, I'm sorry, I accused you of doing the thing you actually did. And in Raskolnikov's mind, it's like, I did the thing. But that's where that ends. And part 5 is all set. It kind of is bookended around Katerina, Marmeladov's wife. Or second wife, second widow.
Yeah.
The second wife whom he has widowed.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but every chapter that's centered around her, I just found incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah, because she's nuts. And she dies of consumption. So somebody at some point explain to me what that is.
It's like a lung disease. I think it was like tuberculosis or something similar to that. Is what. It's like intellectually, I pity her, but just like my gut reaction is like, I need to be as far away from this person as possible. It's just how I felt every time she's on a page.
She reminds me of the archetype of the overbearing mother.
How so?
Because she has two statuses, if you will, in the story. There's the story of her being overbearing to her husband, and also we see that with her children later. So there's that. But she has a glimpse of being a happy household at one point when Marmeladov tells us in the bar of like, well, there was a time where she was really great to me, right? And but she reverted back to this mindset of like, he's a lout, he doesn't do anything, blah 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 blah, and it's like, it's that overbearing, like you're stupid, men are stupid, they can't do anything, they're worthless, blah 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 blah.
Part of me wonders how much of that is her nature and how much of that is her, I guess, her being nurtured into that way because of Marmeladov's personal failings.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's definitely somewhat his fault.
Slava, I don't know if you might have any thoughts on this or any knowledge that might illuminate this possible perception of it. Earlier with the dream of him as a child with the killing of the horse in the street, you talked about a lot of the different interpretations and meanings layered into that dream. And I had wondered if Dostoevsky was saying something about class or like the abolition of serfdom and stuff like that. Because if I remember right, Katerina was born into a high and well-respected family. She talks about it all the time. It's like, oh, I have all these connections. How much of that's real or her own fantasy, I'm not sure. But because Marmeladov, from what I understood, was not highborn. He was just a soldier, which is like the one way a low-born person in old times could actually have some form of status, is as being a soldier. Because it sounded like in one of her fanciful tales, she talks about, oh, you know, these people wanted me to marry this person. Oh, but my heart belongs to another. And that, you know, from what I understood was
I think you're right on track with that. About the dreams, about Katerina, and Dostoevsky. You are on track, Chris. So he is talking about class, the horse being the property. He is one of the traditionalists that is vehemently against serfdom. He wants serfdom to end. He wants equality. And Katerina, the character, I think is by nature that way. Maybe maybe her husband has pushed her, into this more, like brought out the worst in her. But she also has this irrational dislike of immigrants, specifically German immigrants, who she says, just come here and don't learn the language, right? Her landlady, for example. She goes on a whole rant, how apropos.
Even talks about like who is her real father? Was it Ivan or Ludwig or something like that?
And so she is who she is, and maybe her husband brings out the worst in her. So I'm willing to go that route. But yes, to your question, Chris, Dostoevsky is speaking out against classism, in my opinion here, based on what we've already discussed and based on Katerina's prejudice towards German immigrants, all that stuff. Yeah.
Mm. Well, that's what I was wondering about it, though, is because, like, it struck me as that, is it saying that the mixing of classes is bad? Was because, the one case of this example in the book is, the soldier and Katerina, and it just ends terribly. So I wasn't really sure what to make of it, if he was leaning into class
I don't think
aspect
Dostoevsky, and I could be wrong, maybe somebody smarter than me or a Dostoevsky scholar can correct me, I don't think Dostoevsky is saying that the mixing of classes is bad. I think Katerina, he puts that into her mouth, and the comment there by Dostoevsky is it's wrong because it's coming out of the mouth of a dislikable character or unlikable character, excuse me. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, as Porfiry, or did I say his name? Porfiry has said several times, that's the thing about this damn psychology. It can be taken two ways.
Or like 15 ways. You just try and prove whatever point you want to make.
But the other part of this whole event with Katerina's funeral party, or whatever it was, is Lucian, Puddleman, trying to blackmail Sonia. I thought that was a really great scene. That whole thing was, I'm like, holy cow. Like, is this the Sanderlanche for Dostoevsky? Like a little mini Sanderlanche? Because it's, it's not the end of the book and it's not a true equivalent. But it was more tense than I think anything else in the book for me. Like, I was like, holy crap. This is an intense scene. And then Sonia gets redemption again because there's a witness who dismantles Lucian's blackmail.
His roommate. Yeah, it was his roommate. Yeah. Who wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't expected to be there.
Yeah.
Why in this culture in this time do they keep trying to just like frame each other, and then their only evidence is like, well, I'll testify?
Well, I don't know, but that's it's either a trope of that literature that's just a smidgen of truth into what actually happened, or it could be that back then, with the lack of cell phones and recordings and forensic evidence, a nobleman who says, or whatever, nobleman, the strata there probably is a little wide.
Testimony of two people.
I will, as a noble person, I will attest my nobility's in the line. And then people go, well, nobody would lie if they're a noble, right? So part of that is true. Part of that is very much not true. Nobles lied all the freaking time and still do. But I think that's just the culture.
Sorry, I'm still thinking about Katerina. The fact that somewhat culminated into the reveal of her literally basically saying to the whole room, strip search my stepdaughter, was basically how her outburst finally ends there. And that's talking about being an unlikable person.
Yeah. No, that was a very that was a couple chapters, right? That was like one or two chapters. I mean, yeah.
Well, yeah, because I think it was 3 chapters in a row from Lucian giving the money to Sonia, then the funeral thingy, and then I think so it's 3 chapters in a row of this whole affair. Because after that is then where it goes into her and Raskolnikov and Sonia in her room.
Which is a very different, I feel like, style of writing versus today, right? Like where chapter by chapter, oftentimes we're jumping around to character and whatever. But back then it's like, well, segment A happens, then, one person leaves, we're following them. Segment B happens where they do this next thing, and then segment C is they're over at this third place. And it's just like a consecutive clip or a consecutive life lived.
I was visiting my dad a couple weeks ago, and I was telling him we were reading this book, and mentioned it being originally published as a serial, and something that he'd said is like, well, that was like what their entertainment was. Somebody would buy one of them, and they'd all be in a room, and they'd read it together. And that's what made me think the writing style lends to that, of where you can imagine, especially with the long drawn out monologues, of somebody, reading a part, passing the books to another, and then another person, almost like a play, just like in somebody's sitting room.
Absolutely.
Or something.
And I'm going to back up your theory with an anecdotal kind of story or assessment of like the Russian folks that I've met. There is this part of Russian culture, Eastern European culture, that is theatrical. And I don't mean that they are theatrical in their mannerisms of speech, but a lot of people, know how to play an instrument. They will sit around and read poetry to each other, and they will act out scenes from books, and they'll do a decent job. It's like from an early age, you're kind of taught that, you should be a little bit more cultured or learned or whatever, and consuming literature and even acting it out in groups and having fun, drinking, eating, reading poems to each other. That's like a normal part of this culture. So I agree with you. I think sitting there and reading a monologue and even acting it out in a group, that was the entertainment. There was no doom scrolling. So, and maybe they were probably better for it. But
well, the doom scrolling was on a different page of the magazine.
Yeah, and that brings up a different point. Is like they weren't entertained all hours of the day, let alone even once a day. They would get together probably with family regularly for meals, whatever. But then they'd have their time of like, hey, in their sitting room, they're going to go through this story, and now is time for entertainment, and then back to work, right? Like much less entertainment back in the day because there was work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, let's keep moving forward. I want to talk a little bit about the confession in part 5. And one thing that I thought was super, I don't know, I thought this was humorous when he confesses it's Sonia, right, that he confesses to, and she tells him to like go out into the street and just yell out, "I'm a murderer!" Like, I don't know, I got a kick out of that. I mean,
his confession's kind of softballed in too. He's just like, "I was going to tell you who did it." She's like, "Oh, who did it?" "You know who did it, or guess."
Yeah.
It's just like
he didn't want to say it though, because then he has to admit the fault, right?
He makes her suffer some too, like the way he makes her suffer in the previous chapter by like prodding her, with questions and kind of making fun of her a little bit, and even here he's making her suffer a little bit. I thought it was also fascinating to read that line where she tells him to go scream in the streets that he is a murderer. She is literally like a priest to him. Just jumping back to what we talked earlier.
Yeah.
And not only does she, force him, challenge him, that's a better word, to confess, she even says that she will be with him. Also mentioned a little bit earlier, she'll be with him and she'll follow him to Siberia. And she takes part in Raskolnikov's suffering, right? Some of it she takes upon herself. And as soon as she tells him this, he again begins to rationalize and explain and justify the murders. And she continues to reject the help that he offers her. Again, that's a very Christian motif where there is this gospel that's presented, and the person who is in darkness continually rejects it. So I think that's a very Russian Orthodox, more mystical approach to it, but it's still very much in line with Christian understanding of, life, redemption.
Yeah. He has a difficult time receiving that forgiveness and receiving that gift that Sonia wants to give him. Which, by the way, I need to find a woman like Sonia. Like he's murdered somebody, and she is murdered somebody that he's confessing murder of somebody that she was close to.
Her girlfriend,
right? A friend of her, and I will follow you to Siberia.
Just a little. So she's either a priest or she has severe attachment and what is that?
Bad sense of character.
Sense of character.
That's...
And what the hell? In psychology is when you.
Are you talking about the Stockholm?
No.
Helsinki
It's
syndrome?
when somebody
has
it's not a disability, but it's kind of like a disorder, and that's too strong of a word. It's when they constantly try to fix somebody. I just had it. Anyway, sorry, Josh.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. I don't know the term for that. I'm also.
It'll come to me as soon as we, end the recording. But anyway, we've gotten off track. I to get back on track and to talk seriously. This is Sonia taking on the suffering, right? So we established that.
I think you mean
no,
the
I don't think it's side conflicts. It's codependency.
Codependency.
There it is. Codependency. But
I was thinking
edit that out to make Slava seem like less of a retard.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
There's only so much our editor can do. It's in his genetics. I mean, you guys are reading a Russian novel right now. They look very similar.
With friends like these, it's no wonder Raskolnikov murders them.
Look, I've had a good run. I just want to see how far I can push you toward the line to just like really. He flies over from a different state, and then Jonathan goes missing.
Yeah, I wouldn't fly. That'd leave a trail. I mean, I wouldn't do anything. How dare you accuse me of murder?
If I'm going to murder him, I'm going to do it the right way. Arson.
So I have the book right there, and it just seems perfect spot to jump in. But how did I murder her? Is that how men do murders? Do men go to commit a murder as I went then?
Yeah.
I know how to do the murders.
Anyway, so he rejects Sonia's attempt to take on some of his suffering, and he rejects her challenge to go confess at the crossroads. And he does this because he fears the laughter of men who would call him a coward and a fool. A coward because he couldn't live up to his ideals. So there's this attachment to those ideals. And a fool because he would follow the advice of a prostitute. So he is still Raskolnikov, schism man. And as he's having this internal dialogue, that's when she gives him the wooden cross, another kind of religious sign, mystical sign. And he ultimately takes it, but he, at the moment, rejects it. And I think this is, again, I forget which one of you, Jen, said this, but he's not prepared to acknowledge completely that the crime that he's committed.
Yes, he says to give it to him when he goes to actually turn himself in. Don't give it to me.
Exactly.
Because he's insane.
Just a little bit.
This is the thing that frustrates me so much.
Well, I didn't think that was him being insane. And I know why it frustrates you, Jonathan, because he's going back and forth and is non-committal. Well, I think that is him being non-committal, but I think it's him trying to soft lie his way out of going forward.
Yeah, because he's a child. He's a child who murdered 2 women, but he's better that his ego and his hubris made him do that. So he's not responsible. The devil made me do it. Bro,
Look,
be a man.
It took us 50 chapters for him to admit to murdering 1 woman, okay? We it's going to take a bit more to get him to admit he murdered the second one.
If you want to murder people a la carte or like carte blanche, that's what carte blanche, either one, go to war. Go to war.
This moment, usually I'm the insane rambling one, and I'm so happy to have a rambling session from Jonathan.
Rootin' tootin', hootin' and hollerin'. Sick at that.
Another thing I thought was interesting in this part of the book was I don't know who argues this about you can cure the insane purely by logical argument. I don't know. Can we cure Jonathan purely by logical argument?
Good point.
I don't know.
No. Slava has tried for many years. It's not possible. Kris has tried too for many years. Not possible.
I think that was in the next chapter somebody was talking about Katerina, who dies at the end of this. At the end of part 5.
Does she die at the end of part 5?
Yeah.
Or does she die in? Well, yeah, she does. Part 5, chapter 5. Raskolnikov is wandering the city, and Katerina's like losing her shit in the middle of the street or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And the police come to like break it up, and the children run away, and she like collapses. They take her into Sonia's room, and she dies there.
She's gathered a crowd, right?
Yeah.
People were, like,
Oh
watching her
yeah,
dancing.
calling her children stupids because they can't sing
Yeah.
and dance properly.
Yeah, on
Oh my
cue.
god.
She's an overbearing
Yeah.
mother. That's what
And
I'm talking
what's
about.
another interesting event here is Svidrigailov slides in and uses similar language to Raskolnikov to clue him in that he knows, because only he could know, meaning Svidrigailov, because he uses the exact same phrasing as Raskolnikov did, confessing the murder to Sonia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote this note down that he says, I told you we should come together again. I foretold it. It gave me like Insidious vibes, like it just as I have foreseen.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
It's bad.
As the prophecy foretold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ironic. Could
Yeah, and something else just came to me, because we keep calling Raskolnikov, the schism man, right? It's this personality of his, this dual personality, is again exemplified with him being drawn to Sonia, but then also kind of repulsed by her because of, the prostitution thing. And he even dislikes her ideas about suffering, because so the whole she's a prostitute thing is one of his repulsions, but the other one, I think what's more Dostoevsky focuses on more, is he dislikes her ideas about suffering, and then his need to go to prison, because he's still holding on to part of this ideal or idea that murdering the old crow, as he calls her, Alyona Ivanovna, was a good thing. So that's the schism continues within him.
Yeah, because he's a child, and if he admits it, then he has
There
to be
it
a man. And he's not willing to be a man. And that's what we're littered with across all of society. And then you have big men who have power and money who make decisions, and then little boys cry. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. It pisses me off.
I think I said this in an
Grow
earlier
up.
part. He's married to his idea, and he's slowly breaking away from it's not even necessarily. It's his idea being wrong and him being prideful about it, and so there's these multiple layers that are preventing him from, confessing, because I think in this part, his conversation with Sonia, he eventually admits that he is not Napoleon. But he's still not saying his theory is wrong.
Yes, the Napoleon bit. I was reading that going like, oh gosh, shut up. Stop saying what you're saying.
Well, he repeats the Napoleon bit, but he also talks about Muhammad and a few other people as these people that, But like in all of these, like he's not even anywhere close to the same circumstances as them. So it's like, even if we were to say his theory has merit, like you're applying it to a situation that is,
and what's childlike, to use them. Jonathan's terms, what's childlike, he's like, well, if, I'm not Napoleon, I don't have France to conquer, I don't have, X, Y, and Z to do, the old crow, I guess. And Napoleon would have done the same. Again, I'm paraphrasing, guys. Those in the comments who've read this book in and out and know exactly what was said, I'm just paraphrasing. But literally, like, if I was Napoleon, I'd have done this. Or I'm not Napoleon because I don't have France to conquer. But if Napoleon wasn't my...
If the only thing preventing Napoleon is that he just had to kill this one old woman, and then he'd be able to do all the great Napoleon things.
This is my point. I have encountered so many people, and here's let me just throw myself under the bus first. I've been one of these people because I grew up, and I was one of these people at some point. And I think it's kind of just a rite of passage. But at some point, you're like, well, I could do that. And I bet the three of you have all said the same thing. Well, I could do that. Here's the thing. Then do it. Then do it. I'm just channeling my Shia LaBeouf.
Do it! Just
do it.
But because you didn't, you didn't. And so you have no proof, and so you're just being arrogant.
No, going off of, I know something you've said before in the past, Jonathan, is that everyone should try running a small business and then fail at it. Because the learning experience of that is, in some sense of humbling a person, but also just the knowledge you'd gain from attempting something and failing.
Yeah, because people think that they're so much better in their own heads, and they're not. They're so arrogant, they can't see past their own deception and blindness. I'm going off here. They can't see past their own deception and blindness, and so they just believe, well, I could do that. Then do it. Prove it to the world. Prove that you can actually do it. Because until I see the facts, until I see the numbers, you're actually worthless.
Are they a louse? Oh God, I hate that this brings me back to Katerina Ivanovna but her delusions, I feel like she is the extreme end of delusions, but I feel like everyone's had at some point in their life a little bit of delusion, even to something as simple as like wondering like, this lottery ticket, I'm going to win the lottery with this lottery ticket, and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z with it. And of course, society, your friends, they'll snap you out of it, or just, you going through your daily routine, you realize, well, that was stupid of me. But, there are some people that don't get out of it. They buy 50 lottery tickets, or, every single drawing they'll buy one, and then just throwing money away because they have this delusion of where they're going to do great things.
Yeah.
So do it. Do great things. Prove it.
Well, I was going to say, there's a lot of people that just think that they're going to, the way that they're going to make money is by winning the lottery. And that's what's going to provide for them. And they're not willing to go out and go through suffering to actually build wealth.
It's this delusion, and we're all guilty of it to some degree. It's a daydream that we have.
Oh, absolutely.
Where we put ourselves, just like Raskolnikov, and put ourselves into the situation. We play out this hypothetical in our mind, and it's almost an escape where it prevents us from doing the hard stuff in front of us. But if I just could only do this, and you play out the whole movie of your life, winning that $1 million, the $10 million, whatever the hell it is, and you put yourselves in these little scenarios in your head, you play them out, and whatever, half an hour later, and a day later after you're done, you're about it in your own head, your circumstances has not changed. You didn't even buy the lottery ticket, right?
Years later, Slava.
Just the idea of buying the lottery ticket and what that potential has, that's the thing that you get wrapped up in your head and forget what's in front of you. You'll forget to wash your own ass, but spend 3 hours imagining what $750 million, which, you have 1 in a billion chance of winning, will do for you.
And that's where I almost, for Katerina, how much of that is pride for her? Because I'm thinking about, the lottery ticket or anything. How much of that's pride and how much of that is just a childlike lack of, not even self-awareness, but just a childlike lack of awareness. Not
it's
even
privilege.
Necessarily lack of self-awareness, but just...
It's privilege because of the class she comes from. She didn't have to go through that level of suffering until her old age, where she, married down, basically, right? In some senses. And then she's like, oh, I have to actually confront these things. But she hasn't formed the maturity through experience that's required from people who've been serfs.
Yeah.
People don't understand the absolute astronomical amount of work you have to do to be successful. I'm going to say it a second time. You have to do a massive amount of work to be successful at anything. People don't just waltz up and go, yeah, I'd like to do the Olympics this year. They work for 4 years for an opportunity to have 30 seconds of fame. An opportunity that's not even guaranteed. 4 years, day in, day out, strict diets, trainers, coaches, all of it, at the opportunity. And you think you're going to walk in and just be successful? Out of here.
No, but it's true, man. We're laughing, but what you're saying is true. And it doesn't matter whether it's Olympics, you're running a business, you're running a podcast, you want to get the promotion. I know a guy who his position in life, and I'm not knocking him, he's positioned himself listen, I just want to work, and I don't care about making $1 million. I don't want to run my own business. I just want to have my own house. I want to be able to work. I'm good at IT stuff. That's it. But you know what? Even that guy, he comes into work and gives 100%, 110 when needed be, because he wants to keep his job and he wants to get more money and at least advance in his career. Just because he doesn't have these grand plans or dreams, the thing in front of him, he still gives 100% and doesn't write, I was going to say write blank checks, but doesn't phone it in. Doesn't phone it in. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not saying, and here's the thing, you can't misquote me. I'm not saying everybody needs to be a hustle bro. I'm not saying everyone has to achieve high level of success. But if you're going to talk it, then I'm going to hold your feet to the fire until you get burned alive. And you either quit and you stop, or you actually succeed. Because I'd prefer you succeed, but most people don't have the endurance to go through the suffering to actually achieve it.
Yeah.
And the person that you're mentioning, Slava, I think that's great self-awareness. Like, I don't need to be the CEO of this company I work for, or I don't need to be president of the United States. I just want to be able to provide for myself and my family. That still requires work, and it's not. It's realistic, too. Anybody can do that.
I think it's an issue we have here in the West where there's an unspoken entitlement. And I've seen this in people that I know close hand. I'm gonna keep it real vague. That just believe, well, eventually I'll get there. No, you won't. You won't. I don't think you understand the level of work that's required to get where you want to go. Well, one day I'll get a house and a wife and whatever. No, you got to put the work in, man. You can't just be like, oh, I want these things and they're just gonna happen. That's Hollywood fairy tale. It's not gonna happen. You're gonna die alone. You're just going to die alone. You have to put the work in. You have to change jobs. You have to take risks. You got to do stuff. I can't tell you. And the thing is, the reason I'm so passionate about this is because I was one of those retards. I was one of those people. And I'm so sick of watching young men be this way. When you have your whole life ahead of you, you're going to die one day and you're going to go, what'd you do? Well, I played Apex a lot. I did this thing. Cool. You could have changed the world. You could have, but you didn't want to do the work because you knew better. Get out of here, man. You're a degenerate.
I know I'm making fun of you, Jonathan, but I'm happy to see you this passionate. I enjoy it, and I don't mean that with any guile or poking fun at you.
No, and none taken. I just want to see people live the best life that they can, but that requires suffering. It requires, you don't get a lotto ticket. You don't win. You got to work. You don't get to have your dreams. In fact, of your dreams, you might get 3. Maybe, if you work really hard.
But let me just say this, to add on to that. Let's say you do win the lottery ticket. You know the amount of work it takes to keep that money? How much discipline it'll take? Like, let's say
it's a lot of work.
Let's just say you got a meager amount compared to some of the big
5 million. Call
10.
it 5 million.
I was going to say
just
10.
a flat.
Let's say after taxes, all the Powerball, all that nonsense, you have $10 million. How much discipline would it take for you to take 9.5 of it and invest it into properties or the market or put it into a trust fund and take $100,000 salary and still work and not spend it on Lamborghinis, Bugattis, and 10 trips to Italy?
You can't, because it requires a level of education that only comes through suffering and reading something and going like, I don't know what this is talking about. What do you mean assets versus liabilities? What do you mean payoff debt? Because you have to learn. You got to learn and put the work in. You got to go through resistance and suffering to get where you want to go, even if you win the lottery.
All right.
Somebody help me out here.
No, I think most people would not know what to do with $10 million. I mean,
hire me. I'll fight for you.
Yeah. No, I've worked in
The answer
finance.
is give it to Jonathan.
Yes. Yes.
What Chris said.
Said, what would you do with the $10 million? The correct answer is give it to Jonathan.
I'll make sure that 9.5 turns into 11.6 at minimum so that I can take a big bonus of, 7 million.
Speaking of people, yep.
And it's gone.
Speaking of people who are well-grounded despite their social status and lot in life, Chapter 1 of Part 6, Razumikin taking care of Dunya and taking on the responsibility that is Raskolnikov's responsibility, technically, given the social ramifications of him going away and the social kind of understanding of what the man is supposed to do in this time period and the status of women. Like Razumikin, who's just as poor as Raskolnikov, decides to take care of her.
But not a degenerate, because he's willing to work.
Yeah.
And that's what I find so, like, I think it was purposely done. Like, the irony or just what was sad about this whole thing is that you can clearly see that even the fact that his old article, which had all of the ridiculous nonsense that started his theories off, if he didn't kill the old woman, he actually would have had a really bright future for himself.
Yeah.
I feel like this, especially, they've kind of like hinted at that, but I feel like part 6 when he meets with Razumikin, when he meets with his sister Dunya, when he meets with his mother, I feel like that's just like screaming, is like, why on earth did you do this? And when he confesses the murder to Sonia, Sonia's first answer, response is, why did you do this to yourself?
Yeah.
I think was the way she phrased it. It's not that, because I think of, like, if somebody told me they murdered somebody, why did you do this to yourself, is not the first response I would have. But I think that the fact that that was her response is very poignant about, like, what everything in this book is going on about.
Exactly, Chris. What I think you hit the nail on the head with is Raskolnikov has now made contact with humanity, right? Because from where we met him to what he did, through his ups and downs emotionally and mentally, his confession to Sonia, and even a little bit later here where he gives his sister and mother to the care of Razumikin, and then not being afraid of Porfiry anymore, that's where he becomes more human again, right? That's his Lazarus resurrection moment. So I think you're absolutely right. You get these hints of his potential and what he did to destroy that potential, but to add to what you're saying, to dovetail what you're saying, it's his connection now, the reconnection to humanity that allows that, I would say. So.
Yeah, and the fact that, if he didn't do that, he could have been set up, in a situation like his friend Razumikin is, where he's smart and seems to have things mostly together, at least in comparison to Raskolnikov.
Yeah. Exactly.
He's an alcoholic, right? Doesn't Razumikin drink a lot?
Yeah, they do. All of them do. And I've been saving this tidbit.
Yeah,
That's just part of being
I've
Russian.
been saving this tidbit. Thank you, Josh, for that segue. Yes, they all talk about, like, oh yeah, I was saying crazy shit last night just because we were drinking. And everybody's like, yeah, of course, you say crazy shit when you're drinking. It's okay. Here's the thing. Russia's attachment to alcohol, to vodka, goes back to these times too. And after the secular utopian Marxist, revolution, communist revolution, it was an embarrassment to those people because they're like, well, it's a utopia now. We don't have to get stinking drunk to forget where we're living in. But the harsh reality of life post-revolution, there was no utopia, and people still drank. By the 50s and 60s, it had become an embarrassment because everybody abroad was going like, those Russians. So it became an embarrassment to the government at that time, and they put a 30% tax on vodka. Consumption did not drop a bit. Zero drop in consumption. So
the Tsar put some tariffs down, and people were like, well, guess we're going to be poor.
It wasn't the Tsar. It was the guy before Brezhnev. It was the bald guy who came to America waving a shoe at the United Nations. I forget his name. Who's that president? Khrushchev. Yeah, Khrushchev put a 30% tax on vodka. This had to be late 50s, early 60s. I'm bad with dates. But consumption did not go down a bit. Not even 1%.
That's hilarious. Well, it's funny. I think I've been to New York a couple times now, and All right, this is over. This is like a decade ago, I guess now, so it's been a while. But I noticed how
You go
many
to King's
people.
Highway.
Well, I noticed how many people smoke, and I'm pretty sure they have really high taxes on cigarettes.
They do.
People still smoke away. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to tell me you went to the Russian side of
That's
Brooklyn.
a fun part.
Never mind.
I did not do that.
Yeah. And smoking's coming back, at least anecdotally, to me, right? Because I see more people smoking.
Smoke.
I've seen reels where people are commenting on the fact that more people are smoking again.
Smoke.
Like Gen Xers kind of were the last ones to smoke, heavily.
Smoke.
And even a lot of them had quit, and then millennials didn't smoke as much. But now older millennials and even some younger millennials are taking up smoking at heavier rates than ever.
Would you like the smoking section or the non-smoking section? We have this small glass divider to keep the smoke out of your area.
Smoking section on an airplane.
Gen Zers don't understand that, but back in the Steak and Shakes and the Applebee's, they used to ask, "Do you want smoking or non-smoking?" And the non-smoking section was, a piece of glass that's like this big, separating the two spaces. Not a separate room, just a small
The
piece of glass.
fans were just going faster in the smoking section, in the vents. That's it.
Yeah,
at most.
okay. That's generous.
Are you smoking yet?
To comment also, again, going back to the drinking in Russia, I have had Russian vodka, and that I don't really care for vodka. That stuff is good. I can see why you would consume that stuff as much as
a
they do
shout
in
out
Russia.
to a possible sponsor, Russian Standard Platinum. So there's regular Russian Standard, there's Russian Standard Black, and then Russian Standard Platinum. It's $36 for a bottle of vodka, which is some of them can get more. That is the best Russian vodka you can buy this side of the pond. And Beluga, which is, I think, like a Russian recipe, although it's not made in Russia. But Beluga and Russian Standard, for those who want a good Russian vodka, you can't go wrong.
The conversation with Razumikin, jumping back to that, from what I understood, ended with him thinking that Raskolnikov was a political conspirator, in part somewhat informed because, okay, he's acting weird. He's not the murderer because Nikolai confessed in the previous part. And because Svidrigailov gave a letter to Dunya, which put Dunya up in a big fuss. And so all of these things from Razumikin's perspective is like, oh, okay, that must be why. And he never says it outright, but the whole time he's talking back on himself about how he actually had legitimate suspicions that Raskolnikov committed the murder as well.
Yeah.
And then all of these things come together. It's like, oh, okay, I guess he didn't do it, which, again, makes the truth all the more tragic. But that sets us up into Porfiry coming in for that last confrontation. And to me, the scenes between Porfiry and Raskolnikov, which I guess we have, is this the third one or the fourth one? We've only had a few of them, but I've really enjoyed these chapters. And this one, even more so, because he just kind of lays it all bare of like, no, this is how it is. You did it. I can't prove it, but you did it.
Yeah, so Porfiry is, in the commentaries I've read in preparation for this podcast, is Porfiry is a Slavophile like Dostoevsky. He is dedicated to that. He believes the Slavic people are a type of chosen people, and not in the sense that they're maybe better than anybody, but that they have a mission. And maybe some of them believe that they were better than the rest of the world, but that they have like a mission. And he believes in the greatness of Russia, and he's constantly trying to help, people around him. So in the notes here that I found, therefore he views Raskolnikov as a man of noble character, one of the young intellects of Russia who could be great service to the state if he learns to reject his radical ideals. So like an underlining commentary there. Like in the conversations, there's obviously it plays out a little bit different, but people who have dissected this book, that's the commentary that they put forth. So, and that goes back to your potential comment, Chris. Like, if he hadn't done this, what a life he could have had. Because, he is learned, he can write, he's a student, it does come from the poorer side of town, so he understands suffering, he has suffered, and if he didn't take the secular leftist, view of things, and especially the more radical side of that, which is the great man theory, if he didn't take that route and took the Slavic route, if you will, for Porfiry, according to the commentators, that's the tragedy there.
Do you think him saying that he needs fresh air is a callback to him and the state of his room? Because I know early on we laid out his room being, an extension of him and also a reinforcement of his isolation.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, because acknowledging that his theory is wrong and what he did is wrong and his whole worldview is wrong, that's attached to his room, that is a visual representation of that theory to Porfiry. Getting fresh air is shedding that ideology.
I think it was either after this or it was after this. He spends a week or something just wandering the city and sleeping outside in alleyways or something. So he takes it quite literally, but does that process also change him into confessing? Or because in a way it almost seems like he's trying to run away from it still at that point.
Yeah.
Because he's just kind of marinating in everything that's happened the last 2 or 3 weeks of his life.
I think it's the last thing you said. I think it's him marinating. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't thought about it until just now, but if I was to answer on the spot, I think it's him marinating. And still, Raskolnikov, so he's still going back and forth, but that literally marinating.
Yeah.
And,
in the stew of life.
Exactly.
I wanted to make a comment on, I think it was Svidrigailov that is listing out his options, Raskolnikov's options here, and he mentions going to America. I'm like, yeah, we'd love to take you. We'd love to take this murderer. We love doing that.
Doesn't he tell the guy on the street before he shoots himself that he's going to America? Or am I losing my mind? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he says when they question you, tell him he said he was going to America or something like that. Yeah. So it's is that the euphemism of he's going down to the country, or he went to a farm, farm upstate. He's going to America.
And the funny thing is, funny. I don't know if it's funny. I don't know if it's ironic. Maybe it's just interesting to me. America was a country, an established country, but at this time, it was a new country, it was a baby country, but we were going through our own crap here. It was the Civil War was, not
that
2 years
before that.
Yeah,
2 or 3 years
exactly.
before this.
It ended in 1963, and this is written in 1966. So I don't know what that's neither here nor there. I'm not making any literary or social commentary connections here. I think it's just interesting that to read about America in a book references a real thing, because it was a real thing. How far removed we are from the 1860s, how far we are removed from 1860s Russia, and I don't know. I'm going off on a tangent here, but I just thought that it was a fascinating little thing.
Well, I think what's interesting, maybe this going back to what we were talking about with the differences between America and other cultures, I don't know. I feel like we may feel more disconnected from 1860 America, whereas maybe somebody in Russia or in a European country will feel more connected to that time period in their own country. Yeah. I'm just thinking about, grievances that people have in I don't know, in Ireland over what happened between them and England, a few hundred years ago. People will still get upset about those things, whereas here,
well, that harkening back to what Jonathan said about, West Michigan, not specifically West Michigan, but that could also just be our particular, I don't know, I guess, subculture in America, because there are some subcultures in America that, very strongly still hold on to, centuries old grievances. So I think, the way we were raised was to either one, just not be told about them straight up, or two, be told they don't matter. And so we grow up thinking that they don't matter. Whereas to other people, they're, raised saying that these things do matter.
Yeah. And I suppose some of those are real things, right? Like, as, take slavery, for example. 1960s is when, the Civil Rights Act was passed. Or so very recently. For us, it's 80 years ago, but it's within 2 generations. And for it's a
still
living
memory.
And for a lot of people, that is a grievance and a reasonable one. But to Josh's point, I think, I don't know, maybe the advancement of America and how we quickly grew, or maybe it's our culture, maybe it's the individualism aspect of it. There's less collectivism, but in those countries, there are deeper connections to roots. Maybe it's because we're all sons of immigrants or immigrants, and our collective understanding is like, we're Americans. And then, well, I'm an American from Texas, therefore I do X, Y, and Z. I'm an American from Massachusetts, therefore I am X, Y, and Z. Where they're there, meaning Europe, Russia, there's a bit more of a collectivist historical culture to it.
Yeah, they're still attached to their roots. And Slava, I just got to correct you on one thing. The 1960s was 66 years ago. It's like super recent in terms of like the historical. No. This is mostly just for the audience, where it's like, it's not 80 years. We're not even at the 100-year mark. We've got another 30-something years to go, basically, before it's been 100 years since we solved is not the right word, but I think you get the point. Like, since we addressed segregation. Yep. It's not even been 100 years.
And it was 100 years before slavery ended, before segregation was like, oh, maybe we should stop doing this.
Correct. Right. And that's the thing, is like, we as a country have said we threw out all the old roots and we planted new seeds. And so we're building new roots as is, which is why it feels like we're not connected to anything. But you've got China, like, deeply historical, Japan, deeply historical, Russia, deeply historical, Eastern Europe, deeply historical, the Mediterranean, deeply historical. We're like the only country, South America, deeply historical. Like, oh yeah, I remember when so-and-so, the conquistadors came through. Like, that's still something that they know. We don't know anything.
Well, not to get into the weeds, I think some of your examples might be wrong, but I think what it is right about it, though, what I think is generally correct about it, and the general sentiment, though, is like leaning into what I guess... I'm
not a geologist, Chris.
Dostoevsky. I forgot the author's name for a moment there. Holy cow. Dostoevsky's leaning into with this is the radical leftist progressive stuff that was, taking over Europe and would take over Europe in the, at the turn of the century. How that they all sought to throw off ties to old histories. And that's something that people are hesitant to do because if you don't have it, you don't have a place. You don't know where you belong, and you don't know how to live your life, and you need some kind of connection.
What did I get wrong?
I don't want to say in a recorded session what specific setting you get, what specific examples you got wrong, because that would open up a 3-hour conversation that I don't want to get into.
You've listened to like 16-hour podcasts. You're like the guy to do
Well,
that.
Okay, I'll give you one example. China, you're completely wrong about, because the Cultural Revolution they had there, they systematically went to remove all of these ties. And it's only recently, in the last 20 years, that they're kind of post hoc trying to remake connections to that, which most of those are only because of Taiwan having preserved a decent chunk of it.
So let me I don't think we're saying different things. Let me
Josh,
specify
let's
differently.
go grab a cup of coffee.
Because,
Okay.
No, I'm here for it. No, it's all good.
Sorry, I didn't want to get into it. But
so, Chris, I'm not saying that they are deeply historical in the sense of, like, they've never swayed culturally. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that, like, they haven't detached from the fact that they, like, their history as a whole. Like, by coming to America, we've detached from our history as a whole because we're a new identity. Whereas somewhere like China, to just continue with the example,
I still think you're completely wrong on that.
All right. Well, what do you guys think in the comments? Am I right? Is Chris right? Are we both wrong? We got Chinese insurgents coming, like, typing in the comments, like, actually, whatever.
I just commented.
Wait, South and Central America. South and Central American countries are just as new as we are, right? I mean, those were also countries established by Europeans.
But they assimilated the indigenous peoples.
See, that's the mistake we made. We didn't rape the natives.
This is the 3-hour conversation that we're now opening up.
Turns out that's what the English should have done. If only the English raped all the natives, we would have had a ties.
I had an idea.
Darn.
Prima nocta and then the other stuff.
Oh boy.
No,
Tell me I'm wrong.
no, it's a good joke.
So,
I was just saying, I think I'm starting to think Kipling was onto something.
If you know, you know. That's
So anyway, I think that we want Raskolnikov to come to America to tie things back.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna go.
Jonathan sitting there looking like a disappointed father.
Just take after the Russians. I'm always disappointed. You'll never live up to my high expectations of you.
All right. We need a segue. That was good though. No, that was. I loved it.
Here's a segue. Speaking of rape, Svedjigailov and Dunya.
Oh, that's horrible. Look at Jonathan.
All right, if someone else wants to do a different segue, go ahead. I'm gonna bow out.
I read that this morning, and I was thinking, man, Svidrigailov is more of a piece of crap than I remember. He's talking about a 15-year-old, then he's talking about some 13-year-old that he was trying to give dance lessons to or pay for dance lessons, and I was like, wow, you are, well, as my commenter here says, vile, nasty, depraved, sensual man.
Well, it recontextualizes in my mind the letter that his mother wrote to Raskolnikov, too. Thinking back, because Dunya says, like, oh, because she pulls out the pistol at him after he starts, acting a certain way, and he's like, oh, I wondered where that my old friend went, whatever he said, referring to the pistol.
Yeah, and to get back to the commentary about Raskolnikov, in these events, he becomes more and more disgusted with Svidrigailov and the whole situation. I think one thing is that struck Raskolnikov, or triggered him, is how there was a comment about Dunya's eyes can flash with fire or something.
Because the one thing I was thinking when I was going through the book was like, she has all these suitors. She must be like super beautiful. Like, did she just have these beautiful eyes?
All Eastern European women are beautiful, Josh. Didn't you know?
Well, after a lot of vodka.
There you go.
Too.
I'm betraying my ignorance, but I'm not sure exactly what that means. Maybe it's talking to her beauty. Maybe it's talking to her passion, how passionate she can get. Because there's a couple times when she seems like this meek and demure girl, but she does speak her mind when she feels it's necessary. Mm-hmm. So it could be a reference to that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, basically, that seemed to me when she the way that rejection, the whole scene built up with her rejection. It's like basically right after that he was it before that or before they had the nightmares? But in any case, he basically after that he's like, well, okay, that's it, time to go to America.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting to time here, guys. Are there any final thoughts before we call this Crime and Punishment a close? It's a crime that they had to listen to us this long.
Well played. I was going to make a joke about Fievel Goes to America, but that might be too much on the nose.
I love Fievel.
There are no cats in America, Jonathan.
I know. Fievel is my favorite little Jewish mouse. Fievel Mousekowitz. An American Tale.
Oh, no.
Fievel Goes West.
American Tale. It's not Fievel Goes to America. What am I talking about? I'm living in a different timeline.
It's probably different in Russian.
American Tale, and then the sequel, American Tale, Fievel Goes West.
I used to wake my dad up at 6 a.m. every day to watch the VHS.
In undergrad, one of our teachers, when I took Jewish history, one of the classes, he made the kids watch the young adults watch that. He's like, all right, I'm tired of lecturing. Here's a video. It kind of explains some things in a very topical way. I was like, I think you're just phoning it in, but I get to watch a cartoon in college. Okay.
Fievel Mousekowitz. It's a real deal. That's where the episode ends then. Fievel Mousekowitz. Stay tuned next time as we wrap up Crime and Punishment, Part 4, where we will discuss the ending, the 2 epilogues, and
murder a lady on screen.
I didn't sign up for that.
Bring your exes next week.
Here's my letter of resignation for this internship.
Due to personal reasons, I can no longer.
Dying, but not from an ex.
Hey, I have a favor to ask. If you like what we're doing, the simplest way to support the show is to hit that subscribe button. In return, we'll keep leveling up, we'll listen to your feedback, and read the authors that you suggest. And of course, we'll take side quests along the way. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.